are the rates of divorce climbing, and more people are more reluctant to get into the commitment of marriage? Jamil.
Yeah, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum to everyone, to you, Taz, Ihsan, our brothers. It's a good question, Taz, and I think each of us could give an hour or two about that. We all have opinions about it. However, I think I'm going to just make it as simple as possible, and we can get into it a little bit. I think the complexity of modern life makes for a very difficult family existence. And so I'll repeat that. Modern life modernity in general seems to have an antithetical pull from family life and traditional life. And, as people like Harry Oldmeadow, a professor, an Australian, a Muslim, alhamdulillah, a perennial Muslim, and he says that the traditional world had kind of three things. Mm-hmm. The old world, prophethood, prophecy, gone. Then what came after that is the type of monarchy, kingdoms, almost entirely today gone. And the third institution of traditional life and traditional world is marriage and family. It's the last one remaining, and it barely remains, if you all would agree with that. It barely remains in the sense that how many marriages do you know that don't work out? And I'm not saying it's the people who are causing this. It's a ton of marriages are not working out. Modern life is difficult to navigate. And so I think that challenge itself, when you have, let's say, we're from expensive cities, Vancouver, California, LA. This is you got two people working full time, a mother and a father, husband and wife, children to raise, and raising them in a nuclear family without too much help from, let's say, grandma, grandpa, cousins, neighborhood, local mosques, etc. And so now it's all on you. And how exhausted is a man or woman who's working all day, 8, 10, 12 hours a day? What do they have to give each other as spouses? And what do they have to give to their children on top of that? Because I'm a family counselor and I work with families, I have to know a bit of the stats around this. Right now, we have in the United States over 50% of marriages ending up in divorce. Canada is just a few points behind, with just under 50%. Generally, Canada, nationwide. Mm-hmm. And of those marriages, and this is going to be another subtopic, I won't get into it. Of those marriages, 70% of them, the divorce is initiated, both in the United States and Canada, by the wife. Mm-hmm. If you have a college-educated wife, if a woman is college-educated, that number goes to above 80%. Now, this is not a statement to say college-educated women, they're the problem. That's not it at all. But those are telling statistics that tell us that something doesn't work. Our education might not be serving our family life, mm-hmm. both men and women. So, what a disaster! And I'm speaking also not only as a family counselor, and I work with families in nonviolent communication training, etc., but also in real life lived experience.
So why is marriage important for the average man these days? Why is that something that a man in their 20s should think about or even, entertain?
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. I'm going to just quickly touch on what Brother Jamil said before I jump into this question, Taz.
Okay.
And again, going back to why is marriage failing, I would just simplify it, or I would say it in as simple terms as I can, and it would be culture. Our culture is no longer conducive and supportive to the collective. It's a culture of individualism. It's a culture of self-centeredness, selfishness, where the individual is the paramount of existence rather than the collective. So it's a culture of me rather than a culture of we. And this has kind of resulted in an inverted value system. Yes. Throughout human history, we existed, we lived as tribes and as communities and as families first. Now it's me first. So it's basically now we've just shifted into a paradigm of ego. and narcissism. I mean, that's the simple answer. And so much of faith, religion, spirituality, all traditional cultures were collective in nature. They taught the importance and value of the tribe, the family, the community, rather than the self. So this is what, this is a contribution really of perhaps Western civilization. This is kind of the seems to be the operating paradigm. And, the more that this becomes adopted throughout the world, the result is, of course, collapse and fracture and failure. So why is it important? Because this is what we're created for. Right? We are created, this is the purpose. Like, people nowadays seem to have lost touch with basic reality. So, the question comes up, what is my purpose? I need to be doing something meaningful in the world and so on. Well, there's nothing more meaningful than being a mother or a father. Like, this is why you were created. This is an indisputable fact and reality of existence. Every human being has been created, as far as this plane of existence goes, to be a mother or a father. That's your purpose. That's our purpose. And we can reject that purpose. We can seek purpose elsewhere. But if we ignore this most basic, fundamental purpose, it will be very difficult to find a sense of fulfillment, wholeness, completion. Like, I could devote myself to work, for example, as a single man, let's say, or a young guy can. Anybody can. Can devote myself to a career, to a business, to work, to making money, but to what end? For what purpose? And unless that is for something other than myself, or I should say people other than myself, it's very limited in what I'm able to accomplish and my motivation too, in fact. So it's family, it's life, it's this basic reality that God has created and established.
Okay.
That gives us meaning and purpose in our lives.
Ihsan has mentioned the changing landscape of marriage, moving from the societal collective paradigm to more kind of individualistic approach in how it's mainly focused on the ego, on the self. Can we elaborate more on that? Our modern world, the pressure that is exerted on the individuals from, let's say, society, and what the individual goes through.
The societal pressure, we won't look at societal pressure just from the basis of society, but what causes societal pressure? Well, it's inculcating a type of culture that Ihsan referred to as kind of like, as a whole, to overgeneralize Western civilization or Western culture, and post-Christian Western culture, which is post-religious, right? So now, the Muslims don't have any kind of Protestant Reformation. For the vast majority of Muslims, they're still traditional-minded in their approach to life and religion, which is rich, which is a miracle of Islam, the Muslim population. I mean, it's a miracle in and of itself. However, when you talk about the inequalities between cultures and nations, cultures that are traditional and steeped in tradition, very few left, I guess, in our time, they're looked down upon, they are frowned upon, and they are mocked by moderns in the East and West because they're behind. They're behind, you see. So now, to elaborate on what Ihsan mentioned, now, if you say, for example, a friend of mine, his daughter, a 15-year-old girl asked in class, "What do you want to do with your life when you become an adult?" Her response was, "I want to be a wife and mother." Now, in a public school setting, what do you think happened when she said that? Complete ridicule, mockery, and a arrogance of the worst kind in looking down on her answer, because her answer was, in so many words, "What? That's all? We've worked so hard to get to the place where that's not all we are." And so now we actually inculcate this and we internalize this looking down on the wife and mother. And also when the men, when they start to see being providers, or like Ihsan said, working hard, making money, being providers is something they're doing as a favor to their wife and children, we've flipped it. We've completely flipped the script, and now we're thinking that, okay, this is his role. God made him a man, and a man has a purpose. provide, preside, protect. Now, if you go outside of that, no problem, but you can't do that and then expect a nice, smooth family life. Navigating this without the guidance of Islam, without the guidance of a tradition, a religious tradition, Allah sent it as a mercy for us, not to make things difficult.
But what you mentioned...
Yeah. So I'm just going to say that when we complicate things by saying, yeah, that was for that time, but not now. Those values are not applicable now. Well, why not? Why have human beings changed that much? Are we not still 70% water? We got blood, we got tears. We're the same. And so if the perfect generation was about 1400 years ago, and this is how they were, should we not try to at least take some of the blessing, the barakah, from that era and say, how can we live like that now? Choicefully. I want to add that. Choicefully, not because of pressure or not because of a cultural pass down, but we want to do this, which also means simplifying things. That's my answer. Sorry for the long-winded answer, but...
No worries. Ihsan, any comment on that?
Yeah, I mean, it comes down to values. And we've sort of lost touch with classical, traditional, natural values. We've created for ourselves artificial values, an artificial value system, and it's led to an artificial life, artificial lifestyles, artificial paradigms. These things don't support humanity or human beings as we were created, as we've naturally existed throughout human history. And because of the artificially imposed, culture, it does create a real sense of pressure. I mean, this can really be a long discussion just by itself, but, very simply, because of the materialist, individualist paradigm and lifestyle, the ego-driven lifestyle, it's created a culture where we have an ever-escalating requirement, financial responsibility requirement, right? So let's say 50, 60 years ago, a man, an individual income earner could easily provide for his entire family with any job, virtually any job. He could provide for his family. But somehow everybody bought into the idea that we had to all slave in the system. And so the women were taken out of the homes, out of child rearing. And it's a basic, it's basic economics. It's a basic law of supply and demand. Once you've doubled the workforce, which really I think was the intent behind that whole feminist movement, and once you've doubled the workforce, you effectively can halve the wages. So we're working twice as hard now, meaning 2 people are working full-time at what would have been half the wages. So now you need at least 2 people to provide for a single family, especially nowadays. So we're just shooting ourselves in the foot because we're being driven by ego rather than by guidance and wisdom and tradition and, really revelation. We can try to keep figuring this out on our own, but we'll just keep leading ourselves into misery. Or we could just look back to tradition and culture and what's been revealed and actually just live happy and peaceful.
Do you think it's getting way more difficult right now to even communicate these values and their importance in family and how adhering to our tradition and how things went and things were like our traditional marriages before, and how our ancestors were more successful forming families and bringing forth good men and women. So are we failing to communicate these values and embody them and effectively pass them down to generations in this case? Jamil?
Taz, I'll say that it's before even communicating them. We're not living them.
Right.
We don't really need to teach these things if we're living them. We don't have to even talk about it. We don't have to have a podcast on this. We just got to live it. We're talking about something that we're missing. We're talking about this topic today because we're yearning for an answer to these problems. It bothers us. We all have been through hardships, marital hardships, child parenting hardships, child-parent relationships. And so much of it is us not living according to, as Ihsan said, according to what revelation has blessed us and gifted us with. Now, it comes at a cost. It comes at a cost. Because if you suddenly say, not suddenly, but if you gradually start to say, you know what, I have if a man, husband, father says, I have a decent income. It's not endless surplus amount, but I have a decent income. Let's try our best to simplify and minimize our needs, especially our wants, and live a more simple, peaceful existence. We may not get to go to Hawaii every single winter. We may not have 4 cars in the garage or carport. And we may not be able to send all of our kids to university without student loans. So when you start to ask yourself those questions, now ask yourself, who in our community is willing to say no to those things? I don't know a whole lot. Even Muslims from the so-called traditional communities, which inshallah we are all part of, even them, they will have a hard time saying, wait a sec, are you saying we shouldn't progress? And that's it. And so when you say that, you know what, maybe we're too ambitious for our own good.
Right.
That people don't like that language because they see that as stagnant, stalemate, fatalism. This is my lot in life. And I'm just, well, you want me to be content with this when I can be anything? Our story in America and Canada, be anything you want.
Right.
And that's a promise. That's for real. But at what cost, Taz? At what cost? Ihsan is saying, the culture's gone. The era you're talking about, Ihsan, where a man could provide for his wife and children, come home after work, save enough money to send any of his kids or all his kids to college, and have a house paid for within a few years, if anything, maybe even cash, without a interest-bearing loan for the house. That wasn't that long ago. We're talking 1950s.
Yeah, I wanted to address that because,
1950s. 1959 is considered the year where that was the last one. And then 1960 hit, which is why you see all these people from the trad wife community, the traditional wife community, mostly conservative Christians, talking about 1959 being the end of it all.
Yeah.
Right. And that's also when immigration comes. Open door immigration for Canada and the U.S. Lyndon Johnson in the U.S. and Pierre Trudeau in Canada. So now the culture is changing. We are the beneficiaries of that in the sense that for me and Ihsan, our parents were immigrants, right? They came during that time.
Yeah.
So now we are saying, okay, you came to give us a better life. And in certain ways that happened. In other ways, we're cut off. We're cut off. Especially people like Ihsan who come directly from the ancestral culture. For me, I'm 3 generations removed from ancestral culture, right? So that's a big loss. That's a big loss. And I think that what you mentioned about communicating these values is quite difficult because how are you going to communicate something that you're not entirely confident about?
These are evidently existing values. Why would we communicate them to our, grandsons and granddaughters?
Look, Taz, your dad's era, your mom's era, Ihsan, same with you. Remember, they are in the colonial period. They actually were born in or were raised in the colonial period. Same with my parents. So when you have that, it's going to be that if you don't receive that, for example, you, Taz, or you, Ihsan, you are going to be, and I would put money on this if I were a betting man, that both of you are more traditionally minded than even your parents. Even your parents, because you've come back and said, wait a sec, parents, you told us progress at all costs. Do the dunya at all costs. And I'm coming back now, as your son and daughter, I'm coming back saying, I don't know if those costs are worth it. You've told me something that I took a risk to do, and now in my 30s, 40s, whatever, I'm realizing that that's not a cost that I want my kids to have to pay. And it's different.
We have to remember that we are now generations into an intentional indoctrination process that began, mid last century in the 60s and 50s, 60s and moving forward. and in which the entire educational curriculum and system is complicit and actually part of the problem. So like Jamil was saying earlier, right, a girl now in school being asked what does she want to do or what does she want to become when she grows up, and she says a mother and a wife, and she's ridiculed by the environment because of an inverted value system. So this is, it's not about us being able to communicate that, even those who realize it. There's an entire system. The entire system itself is pushing people along an unnatural and unhealthy new value system and culture that's not norm. It's not normal. And so it's like, I don't know, it's like trying to swim upstream, even trying to communicate this to people. The educational system is part of the problem. Media is part of the problem. Everything that we're exposed to is constantly news. The way everything is reported, we're literally living in the matrix. And everything that we're exposed to is continually reinforcing an artificial reality that we're supposed to accept and adopt. And by the time people realize it, it's typically too late. They're in their 30s or 40s or older, and the next generation is already on the conveyor belt, right? It's already too late for them as well. Like by the time people realize it, it's typically too late. So,
and that's tragic. That is tragic, and we see it. Ihsan, you and I, I work with quite a few young men. I'm sure you do too. And I'm sad for them. These young men trying to be straight in their religion, trying to be, these are people with good incomes, like engineers, civil engineers, software engineers. They have a hard time convincing a young lady of 20, 25, say, hey, I got a pretty good job. I got a pretty good income. Let's start on a family right away. All of a sudden, just those two words, and then the woman's gone. That's it. Like, I'll find someone else who's more modern, who understands. So I advise these young men to be patient, to be bold in their requests, but also to understand that the era we're living in, it's going to take time to, as you said, Taz, communicate these values in a way that does not come off as condescending or condemning. That's the key. How to deliver this message to the people, young men and women, is to do so with gentleness, kindness, and a reminder that it's noble. So this young 15-year-old, my friend's daughter, she was taught that the role of a wife and mother is a noble thing in and of itself. They didn't teach her wife, mother, and possibly lawyer, teacher, doctor, nurse on the side. It was wife, mother, and that doesn't, exclude the fact that she could do those things, but those two are the big ones first. And she was raised with that mentality. How many people do you know who raise their daughters like that? I try. I have an 11-year-old daughter, and I try with her. It's an uphill battle because she's in school, but I try with her, and I'm getting there, inshallah. Okay.
What are we referring to by values within this context of marriage and why marriage is failing here? Are we talking about roles, responsibilities?
So when it comes to values, right, it means priorities. What are priorities for us? And historically and traditionally, the values and the priorities of most human beings were, number one, faith, number two, family. Now I want to ask you, and I want to ask people listening, where does that fit into the common value system of most people? And why are we living our lives? Is it for faith and family, or is it for other than that? And these are the only two things that can actually provide a human being real fulfillment and happiness, connection, contentment, tranquility, peace, faith, and family. But that's not where we're encouraged throughout our entire educational system and upbringing. To the contrary, the values have become inverted, and the priorities have become career and work and money and materialism and consumption. So our value system's inverted. We've lost the plot, and we're paying the price.
Ihsan, it seems to me like as if the modern system has replaced those two. I can give you an example. Like now in these big companies, because I worked in these big companies, some of them, they provide you with this environment that is like family-like, environment. An average person would find literally a replacement for these, faith and family in these companies, right? I lived that, and I witnessed that, and it's amazing how much they cater for that and how much funding and resources are allocated to make employees, for example, feel like, family members.
Let me just jump in real quick here, Taz, before Ihsan, if you can allow me to.
Go ahead.
I'm just going to adjust your statement that they give this fulfillment and they help people meet these needs. They seemingly appear to be doing so.
They seemingly,
and so what I would say is that yes, they might be able to fill 10 hours with some valuable time spent in your, in the firm that they're working for, the company, the corporation they're working for sure. And that's wonderful in a workplace. But believe me, life doesn't stop at 5 p.m., 6 p.m., 7 p.m. Most loneliness is experienced at the end of the day, because that's exactly when a man comes home, or even a woman. Right. But you come to your family. The Quran is full of these parables of night being a place of connection and time with family, especially husband and wife, and the day being go seek God's bounty outside. Whether that's in a corporate office or whatever it might be. Right. So I would say that the apparent contentment, happiness, fulfillment that you see in these corporate office rats is false, and it's external. And this is why a good chunk of people, even in those environments, rely on substances or antidepressants or some other risky behavior to erase or to numb that sense of loneliness, or they say in sociology we call it anomie, no sense of belonging. It's not a family. They're trying to make it like a family, but it's not a family.
Yes. That's what I'm saying. Like this modern system is quite, I would say, advanced in creating or coming up with artificial, instant gratifying ways to replace what's real and what's permanent. Ihsan.
Yeah, it's all vain. It's ultimately vain. And I think that's a good word, gratifying and so on for the ego in the moment. But it doesn't provide real, deep, meaningful connection, relationship, the type of bonds and the type of security and safety and love that can be experienced within a family. Like nothing can replace that. That's what sustained humanity from the beginning of our existence. I mean, subhanAllah, think about it. When Allah Almighty subhanahu wa ta'ala created Adam alayhi salam and placed him in the garden in paradise, Allah saw fit for him to create for him his spouse, his mate, his companion, his partner. And they, of course, had their children, and that's been the way of human beings from the beginning of time. That's what ultimately gives human beings purpose, meaning, fulfillment, happiness, and nothing can replace that. We can distract ourselves to no end with these other secondary aspirations, but at the end of the day, as Jamil was saying, we're alone. And for most people, that means loneliness, disconnection, sadness, ultimately depression. And it's quite tragic. Yes. You mentioned that of these traditional institutions, the last one still semi-standing, if that, or on its last leg, is the family unit. The feminists, when they were really engineering this movement, right, they explicitly stated that the family unit was the greatest obstacle to their ends, and that the destruction of the traditional family unit was necessary in order for women to feel or to experience the empowerment that they were looking for.
Right.
So the destruction of the family unit was an explicit goal of the feminist movement, and that has been, of course, the result.
And let's go ahead, Ihsan.
I'll just end with this. I mean, the latest statistics say that I think by 2030 or so, 40 or 50% of women will be doomed to a life of being single and childless. So that's the price that's being paid now. And that doesn't help anybody. I don't think that will make women happy, and it certainly won't make men who are looking for, again, because this is what we're all looking for as human beings. This is what we were created for. We were built for. This is the inherent drive within the biology of the human system, to find a mate and to create a family, to procreate. And, it's been artificially now engineered out of our culture to our own demise.
Yeah, I was just going to add to that. Ihsan hit it right on the nail. That's just exactly. So when you want to, it's not only, people have inherited from the feminists now. So when you go, this was even said that if Black Lives Matter on their website says, challenge the dominance of heteronormativity. It's one of their aspiring goals. Now, civil rights and people of color activists in the 60s, 70s never would have talked like that. So again, challenge heteronormativity. In other words, challenge marriage, family, couples. Another social movement that challenges the family is the whole move towards the promotion of sexual deviation and even the transgender movement, transgenderism. So now we're actually going to do away with masculine, feminine, male, female. Now, what do these all have in common? You take the woman out of her role as a vessel for creation. What a beautiful thing. You take the struggle of people of color, which is a legitimate struggle, minorities in the West, and then we're going to insert heteronormativity as the problem in that movement. Add to that, we have another giant, powerful movement, transgenderism and sexual deviation of all sorts. They all have one thing in common. They break down the family and they limit, if not eliminate, in the case of transgender and homosexual couples, they reduce the number of children that can come from any union. So what do you have in a traditional family? And what about our Islamic traditional family? It's way bigger than that. So you not only have husband, wife, children. Very, very recently, until very, very recently, we had husband, wife, and many, many children. Now that, it's another conversation we can have, but none of the globalists want that because we live in their eyes, an overpopulated world. So This is the best way to put a lid on that, which is what? Get the women out of there. You can't have a woman have 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 kids and still be a corporate CEO boss babe. You just can't. Who's going to look after those kids?
Yes.
And yet it wasn't that long ago, Taz. And maybe this might apply to your birthplace of Tunisia. It wasn't that long ago that people here used to have 4, 5, 6 kids and it was normal. More than that. That was a modest size. Right. Now, the believers still have a lot of kids. Alhamdulillah. Our brother Ihsan has 4. I got 2 so far. We got work to do. Nevertheless, that requires a woman who likes having children and a family and a man who says, I'm going to put myself not at the top of the priority list and take up yet another hobby that costs a lot of money, but I'm going to put these children that I'm providing for, my work is for them.
Right.
My finances are for them. You see, that's very different than the modern individualistic paradigm that Ihsan talked about. That's totally different. That has to do with responsibility, traditional world. And what we have today is something to, it's more about rights and liberty. So a woman might say, I have the right to work. I have the right to an education. No one's denying that. But there's also a responsibility. Nobody can give birth except you, woman.
Yeah.
Nobody can give. I don't care what they say. Only you can do that, and for a limited time. For a limited time. After 40, good luck.
Yeah. I want to delve into more realistic talk here, okay, Jamil? Mm-hmm. Because, human primordial nature hasn't changed, yes, but the economical and the social situation has changed from back then. So families used to live close to each other, right? And when the mother is blessed with 5, 6 children, there's always an auntie, there's always a grandmother, around that can help out with the kids. And the expenses of life are not even close to what we have nowadays. On the opposite side, the salaries and recompensations, they're almost the same. So I find it hard to disregard the changes in the economical and societal, how hard it is right now to afford even the necessities. I'm not talking about what's beyond necessities. Do you think that plays a role in this?
Don't be deluded into thinking that it is you who provides for your children. No matter if it's 3, 6, 7, or 12, they come with their own sustenance, and it's not from you. It's not from you. So a person who only has 2 kids can suffer abject poverty. And a person who had no idea how to provide for 7 kids can be blessed with openings. And it's not rational. In fact, it's quite opposite. So the idea of like, I don't want more kids right now because it's very hard to afford and to give them the time. And that's a rational way of thinking, and that's the postmodern way of thinking. And that's what they want. They want this type of hesitation and trepidation in impregnating our wives. Because we won't do it if we're worried that we won't have the time, capacity, or finances to take care of our responsibilities. And we will have those. By Allah, we will have those, because it is by Allah that we are able to do that. Period. I'm not going to sermonize after that. Ihsan has 4 children he provides for, so I'm going to let him answer.
I mean, you took the words out of my mouth. I was going to begin by just saying, Allah Kareem. Allah is the generous, Allah Razaq, Allah is the provider. End of story. It's just a decision. Right? We can, and what we get is what we believe. So if we believe we don't have the capacity and the ability to make ends meet and to provide and so on, then that's going to be our result. But if we make a decision, hey, these are our values. I want to raise a family. I want to have a healthy, functional, harmonious home based on traditional values. That's where we put our feet. That's where we make our stand. And that will determine the results that we get. It's just a choice. It's just a decision.
You may recall, Taz, and maybe Ihsan, we may have talked about it too. One of the things we talk about in nonviolent communication, which overlaps with our religious tradition of Islam, you can have a paradigm of scarcity, a not enough paradigm. And it's not applicable to only wealth, by the way. Your time. How many people, how many young men, brothers do you know when you tell them, hey, get under the barbell, do some strength training. It's so good for you. Take up martial arts. Scarcity paradigm response, oh, I'd love to do that. I just don't have the time. Similarly, there's another side to that paradigm. We talk about the scarcity paradigm versus the abundance paradigm. And if you adopt the abundance paradigm, there's enough for everyone. And there's enough time in the day to take up martial arts, to take up shooting, to take up archery, to take up weightlifting and getting strong, and to also make money in your time. There's a lot of time, and I think it's barakah. We all know our teacher, Imam, has written, at least published, between 5 and 8 books, I can't recall exactly. That's with most of the time spent writing between the morning prayer and the full sunrise, between Fajr and Shuruq. This is when writing happens, and sometimes, in fact, often, he tells me, in the middle of the night. And all day, as you've observed in Istanbul as well, Ihsan, that you told me, all day serving the people. What does this tell us? We're busy with our lives. I won't say they're trivial lives. We're busy with our work, with our families, with our 1, 2, or 0 kids, or 4 kids. We're busy with all that. So, qillat barakah. Maybe our time has less blessing than it ought to have. And maybe our teacher's time is full of blessing, such that 24 hours don't appear to be 24 hours for him, and yet it is. And he just, by the way, had his 6th child. May Allah preserve her.
I just want to emphasize this point, Jamil. The barakah. The life of the believer is based in barakah. And if we are not, let's say, capturing the early morning, the fajr, the pre-fajr, there's barakah in the morning especially. We won't have barakah in our days. We won't have barakah in our time. If we can't afford to miss or get up on time or go to sleep on time because we have to run for the dunya, well, we're just emphasizing a belief that then begins to manifest for us. Right? That's why the Prophet ﷺ said, Ajala min ash-shaytan. Rush is from Satan. The more that we rush, the more that we're affirming that there isn't enough time. And the more that we affirm that there isn't enough time, that's what we begin to experience. As Allah says, I'm going to be as you expect, according to the expectations, according to your thoughts. Hadith Qudsi. So
time and wealth both, wouldn't you say? Time and wealth both, and many other things.
Everything. So it goes back to this idea of abundance. So do we have an abundance of time or a scarcity of time? I mean, just look at this paradox. Everything that technology, one of the main promises of technology was to give us more time. If we don't have to spend as much time washing the dishes and washing the laundry by hand and cooking our food and doing all of these things, and transportation and walking, now we can drive and fly, we were supposed to have a lot more time available. But ironically and paradoxically, we have less time than ever before. And you can verify this. Go to a traditional society and look how relaxed and chill they are. They have time to relax, to hang out, to drink tea, to eat kebabs, to talk, to walk, to sit, to tell stories. But in the modern day, we don't have time for anything. Why is that? How did technology rob us of time?
Because more control necessitates more responsibilities. So with more systems, you need more people and more time to maintain and continue to build these systems. So it's
a Dajjalic, sorry to interrupt, Taz, it's a Dajjalic system. Everything is the opposite of what it's promised to be.
Yes.
Right. I mean,
yes.
You all know, because Ihsan and I even precede this era. You're a bit younger than us, Taz, but there was a time where all this technology for communicating and connecting with other human beings wasn't there. And you know what happened? There was beautiful connection with
100%,
neighbors,
100%.
with friends. I'm from the 90s like Ihsan. You could just call a friend, and if you're lucky to live in a good neighborhood, knock on the door. How you doing? Can I play with Thomas for the morning? Like it was completely different. And what happens? Children get confident to go and speak for themselves and connect genuinely. Someone knocks on your door. Well, you got to deal with that. So it's totally different. And yet we have all the tools that help us to, quote unquote, connect with each other. Always stay connected. I can be on WhatsApp with you any moment, Taz, when you're traveling the world, or you, Ihsan. I can even go on Umrah with you if you take me on your video. And yet there's no connection.
Not only that, it's also more difficult to actually connect in real time with people. Back in the day when there weren't cell phones, you didn't have something attached to your hip, maybe a beeper at some point. If you guys remember what that is.
I had one. I had a pager.
Yeah, I'm sure you did, Mr. Popular. But but you had a phone in the home, and I don't remember ever having trouble finding or getting a hold of somebody. And now people have phones constantly, and if you have a hard time actually reaching somebody or them reaching you because everybody's so busy.
Right.
Yeah.
So
I'm from the era too where you didn't have to plan a chat with someone. So Ihsan, I mean, you and I are guilty of this, because if I want to talk to you during the week, rarely will I just cold call you because I don't want to interrupt sessions with clients, etc. I might say, Ihsan, are you free in about 2 hours? Can we talk? It'll take about 10 to 15 minutes. I have to actually hyper time it and then time how long it might take to have a little quick connection with you. And I don't recall doing that in the 90s when I came of age. And it was beautiful, because if people were busy, you were just busy, and you had other people to connect with. And it wasn't just always in your... This is why I encourage young people like Taz's age or younger, even younger, as much as you can, get out. Yes, you can order everything you need online, everything. But just get out and interact with human beings a little bit, and see what blessing will come from connecting. So that's, we've gotten off a little bit on that question you asked, Taz.
Yeah.
It was a great question, which is abundance and scarcity. And you said something that was stimulating for me.
I want to ask all the questions that stimulate you guys. That's the point.
So what you said was, I want to be realistic. So,
yes.
So now, just because I'm promoting or calling for a return to tradition in terms of family life and marriage and preserving marriage, in the interest of preserving family life, that does not mean that it's unrealistic to aspire to what I and Ihsan are actually trying to promote. We're not only trying to promote it for others, we're trying to live it ourselves. In our middle age, we're trying to live it ourselves. And so it goes, you have to understand this, Taz. It's countercultural. Countercultural to your parents' generation, to the people around you. I'm going to even say and go as far as saying it's countercultural to most of the people in the traditional houses of worship, like a mosque. It will be countercultural. And Tuba lil ghuraba, blessed are the strangers.
Right. I want to address that more because that's a very, very good point. Like the paradigm of abundance versus the paradigm of scarcity. So, in more specific terms, are we saying that overcalculation of meeting our needs in the future, such as providing for the kids you might have or living in a house that would suffice us, all these things are factors that contribute to Muslim marriages failing because of a failure in exercising faith and instead relying more on materialistic calculation?
Completely, I would say it's a lack of faith and a lack of lived faith. We can say we believe, but it really shows in our actions and in our choices. If we have real faith, we'll live accordingly and we'll get the results accordingly as well.
Lack of faith, right.
Yeah, I'd echo what he said too. I'd echo that, it's so easy to sermonize. Maybe I'm doing it myself. It's so easy to sermonize. Let's all brothers have faith. Allah will provide. God is our provider. We need not worry.
Yeah.
And then, but do we act on that? I'm trying my best to. But I'm also human. And therefore, I slip. And sometimes I get into scarcity. Wait a sec. And then for me, I hear my parents' voice. Take care of yourself. No one's going to take care of you. Don't... Okay, I'll give you a personal situation with regards to wealth, because this seems to come up in the purpose of the discussions around marriage so much, and it's so sad. A brother who I know, a very close friend of mine, he came and he said, Jamil, I'm in difficult circumstances, very difficult. I'm at loss. I'm at a risk of losing my home. And I said, I'm sorry to hear that. I'm glad you came to me. Well, hold on. And so I said, let us make a dua and have a Fatiha and a Salat al-Fatih and a few other things to increase your wealth and mine, such that we're more able to relax at night and go to sleep knowing full well Allah is our provider. And even after a difficult time, we did it. I then gave him some barakah, a good chunk of barakah. And I said, hold on to this for as long as you need to, even if it be several months. This is surplus for me, and I'm happy to help in any way I can. This is not a gift. I need it back at some point. And around this time, we did it. And I said, but just have faith. Don't be running around yet getting worried and scared and anxious. I don't know what I would do if I'm in your shoes, if I were in your shoes, but I'm just going to tell you what I think intellectually is the right way to go. And he did. He reported to me only a few weeks ago. He said, Jamil, thank you so much for just pushing me a little bit and encouraging me to not lose it. Because right now, I just got a job with this company as their primary financial advisor. And he's back up on his feet. He's back up on his feet. And I said, there's the barakah. There's the blessing. You will not go without. You will not go without. Even though Allah says we will test you, Allah says, with a test about you'll have a loss of life, loss of wealth, loss of فَبَشِّرِ الصَّابِرِينَ. Give glad tidings to the patient ones. We always say this. How many of us exercise it? I know I fail at it many times. Until you get beat up. We talked about this earlier. Ihsan and I have talked about this a lot, actually. You're going to get hit over the head over and over and over again until you submit and surrender. So don't be a knucklehead. Don't be so stubborn such that you need to get hit over and over again before you learn your lesson.
With great power comes great responsibility. So faith is power, right? With great faith comes great responsibility. Because if you're relying on faith, that means you're responsible for being entitled for that faith. You're doing what you need to do. When that doesn't happen, claiming faith, even between you and yourself, becomes really hard.
Jamil said earlier that you will be tested. And he's quoting the Quran, in which Allah says throughout the Quran, you will be tested. In fact, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, do you think that you can say you believe meaning you have faith and you will not be tested. So what is the test? What are these tests that we undergo in our lives and throughout our lifetimes? Well, it's a test of faith. Every test is a test of faith. And test doesn't just mean pass or fail, but it means to exercise. So a test is an opportunity to exercise faith and thereby make it stronger, thereby deepen it. When the Bedouins came to the Prophet ﷺ and said, we are amongst the believers, Allah is saying in the Quran, say to them, you have only entered into Islam, but you are not yet believers, for belief has not yet entered into your hearts. So these tests, these trials, or I should say these challenges and hardships that we go through, like if you go to the gym and exercise and pick up some weights and get under a barbell and so on, and you do some exercises, you're testing yourself. You're exercising so that you can become stronger. In the same way, life gives us opportunities to exercise faith. So when you're going through a hardship or a challenge and you're wondering how you're going to make ends meet by the end of the month and support your family and make sure that you've got a roof over your wife and children's heads and food on the table and all of that, you can despair, you can run to and fro, or you can affirm faith and say, Allah is the provider. He will provide. He gave me this responsibility. He will provide. He will give me the means and the ability to secure the sustenance that's required. And then you take action. So belief plus action equals results. You put these two together, you can accomplish anything in life. Where there's belief and action, it will always result in a positive result. And the greater the belief, oftentimes the less action that's required.
Right.
And by taking action, you increase your belief. So ultimately it all comes down to faith. To the point that a faith becomes so real as is recorded in the scriptures, the great messenger and prophet of Allah, Jesus alayhi salam, saying, if you have real faith, as much as a seed in your heart, you can say to a mountain, move, and it will move. Now that's real faith, divine faith, prophetic faith, sacred faith, real faith that has truly taken root in the heart. This is, of course, human potential. This is what we were created for. We weren't created to be servants and slaves to this world because we have no faith. If we have real faith, we'll act accordingly, we'll live accordingly, and the world will serve us, not the other way around, as it was meant to be, because we are then serving our Creator. We have to remember who we are. We've completely lost the plot. We have to remember who we are. We were created to be deputies of the Almighty, representatives of the Most High, vicegerents of the Creator. And instead we've turned ourselves into slaves for the world.
And you know, Taz, going back to the original point of this, you're asking this question, a great question, by the way. It's a question in the context of marriage. So what a spiritual discussion we're all having right now. And I'm wondering how much of these discussions occur during the sit-down cards between the man and the woman, or the man and the woman's guardian, the wali. I'm not hearing these kind of conversations happen. Now, if I'm facilitating those conversations, that's what I would do. What Ihsan is talking about right now, I would lead it towards that, such that the exchange between the guardian and the man, or the woman and the man, is a rich exchange. It's not, what do you like eating? How often do you expect meals on the table? Those are commonality, compatibility questions that can and need to be asked, perhaps, but that doesn't get us through very difficult times. Because if faith is not present in a marital relationship, the first sign of hardship, someone's going to bounce. Someone's going to get out of that. And then who's going to get out? We know right now the stats are 70 to 80% of the ones that say I want out are the women.
Right.
So that faith actually keeps families together, keeps husbands and wives together, to push until there's nothing left in them, such that they can say, we did it, we tried, and we got through. Or we did it, we tried, and we're still at the same place. We need to probably move on.
Honestly, Jamil, in my experience, I've seen more people adhering to faith and they don't talk about it than people talking about it, not adhering to it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I feel like these conversations, they can easily take place. But when the rubber hit the road,
when the tire hits the road,
the tire hits the road, it's a different case, right? So, and that's why I think it's really up to the intuition at that time to actually, engage with this person or not.
Well,
to
add to that, sorry, Taz, to add to that, I'm going to say more than intuition, because intuition is just you still. It's just you. But you're right in the sense that when I just recently asked beloved Imam about this, he said, your heart will never lie to you. So should you meet someone who you suspect that you can be so relaxed and at ease with, and then on top of that, you see all the signs of a person of faith, rest assured your heart will not lie.
Mm-hmm.
That's beautiful. And that's what you're saying by intuition. It's not all this calculative stuff where we're swiping and looking at resumes and CVs.
Even conversations. You
That's
can have
right.
very, very rich conversation.
Right.
And still, that's the state of the tongue, not the state of the hal, like of the condition.
Right.
And that conversation is very entertaining. It's enjoyable, right?
Right.
But when the tire hits the road, it's another story. A lot of times.
You know what? And the barak, Ihsan brought up barakah. The barakah, if it's placed in your household between a man and his wife and her husband, there's no replacing that, and there's no rational understanding like, oh, we must have done some great compatibility checks with each other and sit-down cards were great. No. Allah put barakah in your marriage, in your relationship, and you are the beneficiaries of Al-Wahhab,
right?
The one who gave it to you. So don't think you earned anything. A little humility is in order.
What you seek is seeking. If you're really seeking that, I believe it's going to come your way. It doesn't matter
Inshallah.
what. If seeking otherwise, regardless of what your tongue says.
And so that's where Ihsan, he mentioned Ihsan, you mentioned the aspect of having faith. That's so hard to have more than individually, but collectively as a family, because you're going to now ask, if you marry a spouse who's not at the same level as you, or you, her, or him, in terms of faith, there's a patience to growing together a little bit. And I'm not noticing that a lot of people have this patience. It's more, why isn't she ready now? Why isn't he ready now? Well, people are different.
Right, and that person can have more potential than you, actually. They just didn't come across.
They're not there yet.
The rizq yet. Yeah,
they're not there.
They might have more potential than you.
And we never know, because the hadith says, al-umur bi khawatimiha, matters are by their endings.
Right.
Not now, not how they are now. So I think that, it's of paramount importance to do compatibility, to check for commonality with a woman, with a man, when you're doing that. But at the end of the day, it's a matter of faith. It's not a matter of anything else but pure faith of putting it in Allah's hands. Tafweed.
SubhanAllah, I think we came full circle. And the question in the beginning was, why is marriage really collapsing? And I think at the end of the day, this is really the essence of the answer, really. I mean, it really comes down to this, which is faith. Real faith.
Right.
Applied faith.
And this is what this podcast is about. It's about spiritual strength eventually.
And for us, perhaps this is countercultural to the superficial, if I may call it that. Maybe we'll get attacked because I say this. Maybe we'll get attacked for saying that the superficial masculinity movement is void of this language of faith. Unfortunately, in many of the circles. Not all. There are exceptions to that. But as far as what we see on a day-to-day basis, it's part of masculinity to be able to be strong, to be healthy, to be able to present and charm a woman. Fine. and to have some financial backing to you and some intelligence and entrepreneurship, all of that, hunting, wrestling, martial arts, whatever, those are important, but they're not foundational like spiritual strength. When spiritual strength is strong, the foundation, those things can be worked on. You can acquire that, but not in a different order. Spiritual strength is first. And I know we're going to have
We're gonna have
a guest.
Yeah.
Yes, we're going to have a
And
guest for that topic, and that topic shall be rich, inshallah. And I think that, all of us, all three of us, we're trying our best to actually live what we're talking about here. And the reason we're talking about it is because we want it ourselves. We're not glorious practitioners. We want it
100%.
ourselves.
For me, it's more like a reminder, man. These weekly podcasts are like weekly reminders. It's amazing.
Well, then man up and start training.
I started, Jamil. Come on, man. Come on, man.
I'm just kidding.
I'm back.
I'm giving you a hard time. Sorry.
No worries, no worries.
I mean, if you have any more questions that you want to put in there like that are good to end with, do so now.
We talked about these factors that contribute to the failure. How about success? Can we talk about how to succeed?
Shall we save that for our next episode? That's a topic just by itself.
I'll say to not be on a completely dreary 1.5 hours of just complaint after complaint and sadness after sadness, tragedy after tragedy. Let's just say that it is possible for us to retrieve what we once had. It is very possible. Because if we were to say that, Ya Allah, the times are different, everything's gone bad and sour, the people are sour, the women, the children, everything, the society. If there were no chance for hope, if there were no space for hope, then Allah's promise would not be true. And that is not the case. Allah's promise is true. So all we do is turn around, tawbah, come back, collectively and individually. If we can start individually, then it might spread. So us three, we can start on our own. We can spread that to our families, our children, our neighbors, our friends, and have a lightness to it. So it's not so tragic and sad and dreary, because that can get overwhelming too. We're not an irrelevant community. We think we're so irrelevant, but we're absolutely relevant to outsiders. People look at us with an eye of admiration that I haven't seen until this time, really. I didn't even realize it. But they look at us as solid, people of faith. And yet, look at how we are. And yet people look at us like, okay, these people are the only people on the planet who hold on to their faith despite any outward circumstances. Just look at the Holy Land right now. And what are they saying in response to slaughter and genocide? Alhamdulillah, walillahi alhamd, Allahu Akbar. I don't know what I would do.
Yeah.
All I can say is I'm proud to be among that community of people. And I want to encourage and inculcate in ourselves, us three, and others, the people we work with, the people we interact with, to not lose hope. And to not be in a state of, woe is us. What a situation we're in. No, alhamdulillah. We're in a situation exactly where we're supposed to be by Allah's decree. And inshallah, we will come out on top. And there'll be some hard hits. We can take it.
Be up to the responsibility of carrying the power of faith, basically.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
And I'd say not only is it possible, but it's necessary.
Mm-hmm.
It's necessary.
Yeah. Barakallahu fikuma, مثلنا, Jamil and Ihsan. Alhamdulillah, this was great. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.